All right, so we're working with our rational numbers. In the previous lesson, we looked at how do I find those excluded values, what can't work for an x or what can't work for y. And then we talked about what those mean in terms of creating an asymptote, a line that the graph approaches but never actually connects. So now we're going to actually go ahead and put all that to use, and we're going to go ahead and actually graph some of these equations for ourselves. So a couple things to start with. Our first step is still going to be to find those asymptote lines, sorry, that's hard to say, and figure out, okay, what is my graph going to get close to but never actually cross? We can use that information to give us our domain and our range, and then we're just going to create an input-output table. We're going to have a total of 7 values, okay? And I'll show you what our middle number is going to be here in a second, and then we're going to give us 3 numbers on either side, just so we can have some additional numbers that we can use to graph. Okay? So let's see this in action. Example 1's kind of already done for us. They found their asymptote line as x equals 1, so that's x equals 1. And they found their horizontal was y equals 0, so y equals 0. Then they created their table of values with their x's and y's. This is what you're going to get from your calculator in the table of values. So you're just going to graph the equation and then pull up the table of values to find your x and y coordinates, and you simply plot those points. So here's what this looks like as we do a couple together. So we start with our equation. We want to find our vertical asymptote. That's our x value. What doesn't work for x? Well, we put our denominator equal to 0, and we find that x can't be -1. So we go to -1 for x, and we draw in that line as a dashed line, or sometimes I'll use my highlighter to draw it in so it kind of stands out. But that's the vertical line that it's going to approach but never touch. For the horizontal asymptote, that's going to be the y value. What y value doesn't work? Well, remember, the y value is based on c, what is added or subtracted at the end of the problem. So in this case, my y is going to be 3. That means at a y of 3, I'm going to have a horizontal line that my points will never cross, that my line will never cross. Okay? So that gives me my guiding points. Now I want to find some points to actually plot the graph and draw in what I'm going to have. So we're going to take that x value, and that's going to be the middle of my graph, my excluded value. And because it's excluded, meaning it can't go into the equation, I can't get a number, my y value is going to be undefined, UND. Then I simply pull up my data in my table of values, and I find 0, 1, and 2 as I count up. Well, that's going to give me 8, 5.5, and 4.66, or 4.67, 4 2/3. So I can plot those points. I go to 0 and 8, 1 and 5.5, 2 and 4.66. And then I just use that to guide me as I draw my curve. All right, and then I can do the same in the opposite direction. -2, -3, -4. That's going to give me -2, 0.5 or 1/2, and 1.33. So I'm going to go to -2, -2, -3.5, -4, and 1 1/3. And again, that kind of guides my line. Remember, when I draw that curve, it's going to get really close. It's going to approach those 2 asymptote lines, but it's never actually going to connect with them. All right, so let's see that on this next one. So remember, our vertical is the x. Where is x not going to hit? Well, I set my denominator equal to 0, and I get an x of 2. So at x of 2, now I'm going to find my y value. Remember, my y value is what gets added or subtracted outside of the fraction piece. Well, in this case, it's 0, so I have y of 0. So I'm going to have a horizontal asymptote at y equals 0. So those are going to be my 2 lines that I'm never going to cross, but I'm going to get really close to it. Okay? So my middle point in my data table is that 2, that middle point, because I know from there going to the right I'm going to get a graph, and from there going to the left I'm going to get a graph. So I'm just going to count up 3, 4, and 5, and there I get values of 1, 1/2, and 1/3. So I'm going to get some really small values. So 3 and 1, 4 1/2, 5 1/3. So I'm going to get a line that looks something like this as I move myself along. Going in the other direction, I'd have 1, 0, and -1. So that's -1, -1/2, and -1/3. So at 1 and -1, 0 and -1/2, and -1/3. And then we connect them and kind of get as close to those asymptote lines as we possibly can. Okay, so let's do one more quick. So our verticals are x, set that denominator equal to 0. Where can it not have a value? Well, it can't have a value of x of 1. So at x of 1, I'm going to have a vertical line that it never crosses. For my y's, it's what's added or subtracted after the equation. Because in order to get an answer of -2, I would need my fraction to turn to 0. But since I'm plugging my x's into the denominator and I can't plug in a 0, I can't make it into a 0, there's no way to get exactly -2. So y will never hit -2. So that's my horizontal line. Okay. I use that excluded value of 1 for x as my midpoint. Going up, I have 2, 3, and 4, which gives me 0, -1, -1.33. So 2 and 0, 3 and -1, 4 and -1.33. And I'm going to draw my line, make sure it gets really close to that asymptote line, but never actually crosses it. Going the other direction, I have 0, -1, and -2. That gives me -4, -3, and -2 and 2/3. So 0 and -4, -1 and -3, -2 and 2 and 2/3. And then I draw that line and try to get as close to those asymptote lines as we possibly can. Okay? So that's how we graph a rational equation.